My name's Tom Bradfield, and this is my lovely wife, Cindy Bradfield. We've been married now a little over 2 months, and we're members of RCC for approximately 6 years each. We met here. We found salvation here. We found baptism here, and we love it. Well, we met, believe it or not, in life group.
I had just moved, got my own place, and I was happy, and I'm like, this is cool, I can do this, and I was happy up there next to my kids, and one night after life group, he says, can I ask you something? And I said, yeah. He goes, well, can we go outside? And I'm like, I just knew what it was going to be, and I'm like, I don't want to do this, I want to do this. So I walked out, and he asked me if I would go out to dinner and to a show on a week from Friday, and I just went, oh, what's it gonna hurt? And here we are, married.
My baptism absolutely changed me forever. Absolutely. You know, you go in one person, and you come out somebody else. And I'm telling you, for me, that's what happened.
It was the most amazing thing I'd ever been through in my life, and my life really changed after that. And that's about the time that Tom and I really got to getting closer. And I thought, well, maybe that was, washed away. All that past is gone now. So let's start fresh and new. And I went with it, and it was so cool.
To me, the best part about being a member of this church is this is where I found Christ. And maybe I can help somebody else find what I found. That's what's beautiful to me about it, is that opportunity to help somebody else. Because there are a lot of folks out here, and they weigh real heavy on my mind. And to be a part of this growing church is just, it's a God's blessing to me. It's one of the greatest gifts I've ever been given.
It just blows my mind that in, 6 or 7 short years that it's grown like it has. And now we're going to get the new building, and that is so exciting. I can't wait till that happens. And that'll give us and others, I hope, more of a chance to participate in other ways in helping the future of the church to grow.
We want to help this church really get this thing off the ground for the benefit, not of us, not so we can have a name on a plaque on the wall. I want it to be to the glory of God. That's what I want.
Tom and Cindy, they are a great example of God's amazing story writing abilities. What God can do in individuals and then brings them together in this relationship, just so cool. I'm so glad they used their story for us. And if you have a story that you want to share, or maybe you don't want to share it, but you'd be willing to act boldly and share it anyway, because God could use it, we have a really easy way for you to do that now. We've created this new site for Imagine3, this generosity initiative and vision we're going through right now as a church. And if you go to that website, Imagine320.org, by the way, we still have our other website as well, Revolution's website, and then you have this for this process. But if you go to the top, it says share your story. If you click on that and scroll down, you'll see some boxes that look like this right here to put some information in, and then you can put your story in there and submit it. We've created this really easy way because we know everybody has a story. Whether you're still working through parts of your story, which that's probably all of us, or you feel like you've got through it, or what, everybody has a story. We'd love to hear your story and figure out how the church can best utilize your story to help others too, because our story's not just for us. So I just challenge you to submit your story on there. We had multiple stories submitted, or at least posted this week. We had a story that was posted on our Facebook group this week, and I asked this person, do you care if I share the story on Sunday? And they said yes, so I'm just going to read their story. This is so awesome to hear. And by the way, the kids are rocking and rolling over here. Revolution Kids, if you're new, that's going to be a couple songs. And if you have your kids in here today, man, we would really encourage you to get the kids checked in. Revolution Kids is doing an awesome ministry at their age level, and just we would really encourage you getting your kids checked in to be part of that. But that's just a little side thing. So here's a story that was submitted this week. What Imagine3 means to me and my family. It means reaching another girl who feels the weight of shame and guilt that she'll never get out from under it, and Jesus steps in. It means reaching a mom out there who just lost her son to addiction. She feels broken, helpless, and angry, and Jesus steps in. It means reaching out to a young couple in the thick of raising kids and constantly worrying if they're doing it right. They form close bonds with those that they surround themselves with at the church. They give them constant encouragement and prayers for their kids. Jesus steps in. It means reaching those in the community who think they're doing an okay job. They're making it through life, doing good things. Jesus steps in and their whole lives are changed. It's not about doing good anymore. It's about taking up your cross and living for Him daily. This church has done all of this and more for our family within the last 2.5 years at Revolution. I cannot wait to see the so many more lives that will be changed because of Imagine3. Let's dare to dream, friends. That's what it's all about. That's what this whole process called Imagine3 is all about. So submit your story. We've made a really easy way to do that. And we're going to start today with the Bible story we've been looking at in this series. We've been looking at this Bible character named Benaiah every single week. And we've read this verse every single week of the series so far that kind of sets up his story. And then I'm going to read that verse again, and then we're going to find out some brand new information about our Bible character Benaiah today. So let me read the first verse about Benaiah in 2 Samuel 23, verse 20. It says, Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, a valiant fighter from Kabzeel, performed great exploits. And we've been talking about those exploits every week, or those bold actions, as we've been calling it. That Benaiah killed 2 lion-like men of Moab. Benaiah killed a literal lion. That's in there. He killed this giant Egyptian warrior. He went up against this Egyptian, stole his spear, killed him with a spear. So we've been looking at the exploits, and I think we can get the false impression by just looking at these things Benaiah did. And we might just tend to think like Benaiah was some rogue mercenary that was out for his own interests, and he just went around killing people and things randomly. Like he was a poacher that just went on lion expeditions and killed lions for sport, or he was some rogue assassin that worked for himself and, was kind of running around for himself like Jason Bourne or something like that. Jason Bourne's a bad dude too, but Benaiah was not some rogue mercenary, some rogue assassin. In the final verse about Benaiah in 2 Samuel 23, we find out something new that really connects with today and shows who Benaiah really is. So here's the new information. It says that's Benaiah, was held in greater honor than any of the 30, but he was not included among the 3, and those are a couple elite military groups. And here's the new stuff. And David put him in charge of his bodyguard. We find out Benaiah was the captain of David's bodyguard, King David's bodyguard. And with this detail and a few other things we'll look at later in the talk today, we find out something new about this valiant fighter. We find out that Benaiah was a man of bold commitment. Benaiah committed his life to a cause and a kingdom that was bigger than himself. Benaiah's life was dedicated to a mission beyond himself. He was the leader of King David's bodyguard. And with that, just that little bit of information, I just want to stop right here and pray as we dive into the idea of bold commitment today. So let's just bow our heads real quick. God, I believe this is a pivotal Sunday in the life of Revolution Church. I think this is just such an important message for me, for everyone here. And I pray that you would do what only you can do, that you would soften our hearts and open our minds to what is going to be shared today. That it would just change, it would challenge, it would work in us and make us closer like your Son, Jesus. And we pray this in His name. Amen. So we've talked about dreaming big. We've talked about acting bold. Last week we talked about the obstacles that get in the way of our bold actions at times or moving more towards God, these things that get in the way. So today is about the boldness of commitment. And I need to give a quick disclaimer with this talk. I'm going to share some things today that are hard to hear. I'm going to share some information about our church that's going to be a little difficult to process, depending on where you find yourself in this information. Maybe wherever you find yourself, it might be hard to process. I'm going to give a challenge today that our human nature is going to want to fight against. Because it's difficult. It's something that it's hard to see in ourselves. It's something that's hard to work through. And the reason I'm venturing through this minefield about commitment today is because I know it is going to take a church willing to boldly commit for our Imagine 320 vision to be accomplished. To see the dramatic life change we want to see in Logansport, Cass County, and beyond, it is going to take a church willing to commit our time, our talents, and our treasures in bold ways to see this change happen. And here's the deal. So here's the deal. If something I say today begins to offend you, or you start to get a little defensive in your thinking, and maybe this has already happened in the series where you've been like, man, all Anthony is talking about in this whole series is money. And I'm just about tired of it. Like, all he wants to talk about is I'm just bold commitment and give boldly and serve boldly. I'm done with this. I'm just done with this. If that's some of the thoughts you've been having, or maybe if that thought kind of tries to creep in today, I would just challenge you to think about what God has done in your life through Revolution Church. And this is potentially the most important thing I'm going to say all series long. Most important thing. So if we get everybody to have a seat back there, this is the most important thing. If you forget everything else, like you zone out and start counting ceiling tiles after this, but you remember this part right here, it was worth the price of admission to Revolution Church today. Half of you in this room, in second service, have found faith and hope in Christ since coming to Revolution Church. Every time we ask the question, about half the hands go up. Every time we do a survey, it shows the same thing. Half of the individuals at Revolution Church, your whole life has been changed for the better since coming to Revolution. You found Jesus here at Revolution Church. And God gets the glory for that. Not Revolution, not Anthony. All the glory goes to God. God is doing something very unique through this movement called Revolution Church. And for those that were Christ followers before you ever walked through the Revolution front doors, my guess is you're here because your life is changing for the better. You're growing closer to Jesus through this church. Your thinking and your heart is being challenged through what we're doing as a church. That life change, your life change, happened because there were people that came before you and made a commitment for the Revolution ministry to exist before you. A commitment to pray boldly and serve boldly and give boldly. Do you get what I'm saying? There were people that came before. And for more people to come to Christ in the coming years, it is going to take a bold commitment from all of us to reach the next Tom and Cindy, or the next Bobby and Lindsay, or the next Matt. And I'm just using those names because those are the video stories we've seen in this series. So I'm just humbly asking, I am pleading that you would see through my words at times to the heart of what I'm saying and why I'm saying it. This has been one of the hardest series to ever communicate at Revolution Church because we are going through a culture shift as a church with this series. It's been difficult, but what compels me to share this is people, thousands of people in our county and beyond that do not know Jesus Christ. And it's going to take a church willing to step up with bold commitment for that to happen. And if this is your first week at Revolution, I'm so glad you're here. We're in the beginning stages of a journey where we're calling Revolution Church to the next level of faith. And so if you're here today, maybe you don't even know Jesus yet, but you're going to hear this and you're like, man, I get that. And I even after 1 week, like, I want to be part of that. Or maybe you'll leave and you'll be like, that's pretty bold and big, and I need to think about this. I need to pray about this. I'm not even sure about Jesus yet, but you're here, and I'm so glad you're part of this week, because this is a pivotal week for Revolution Church. And again, we're talking about the boldness of commitment today. Because see, everything that happens for God comes out of bold commitment. No one has all-in faith without bold commitment. No one follows the words and laws of God without bold commitment. I mean, in bold commitment, it defines our lives. The things that we commit our lives to, it changes us. It changes those around us. And one of the goals of life is to commit to less bad things and more good things the further along we get in our journey, because our commitments, they shape who we are. And the idea of commitment, it's all over the pages of the Bible. You can write some of these verses down and look them up later if you want. But Psalm 37:5, it says, commit your ways to the Lord. Proverbs 16:3, it says, commit your work to the Lord, or commit your actions to the Lord, some translations say. Romans chapter 12, first couple verses, it talks about committing or submitting our bodies to God. as a living sacrifice. 1 Kings 8:61, it says to commit your heart to God. All kinds of verses throughout the Bible talks about committing everything, committing your whole self and every part of who you are to the ways and will of God. And of course, God, what's awesome about our God is He never commands or demands anything of us that He's not willing to commit to as well. Look, our God is a God of bold commitment. And he says this to a group of people in Judges chapter 2. And in this verse right here, it is timeless and placeless, which means it still relates to today. That God is speaking this to us today, and I'm going to explain more of it later. But in Judges 2, verse 1, God says this. He says, I will never break my covenant with you. And a covenant is a bold commitment. It's a binding pledge, an oath. And what God is saying is, I am a God that makes bold commitments and keeps those bold commitments. I give you my word, and my word is my bond. I will never break my covenant with you. And although this is the idea of Scripture, like follow the threads, it's all throughout Scripture, God's original plan is for us to be a people that makes bold commitments and doesn't break them because we follow a God that makes bold commitments to us and doesn't break them. But I think we become a culture that instead of saying, I will never break my commitment with you, I think more often than not, we're saying, I will never make my commitment with you. And I'm at the very beginning of what is called the Millennial Generation. I was born in 1981, graduated from high school in the year 2000. And some people get confused about like what the age demographic of millennials is. I found this tweet this week that kind of shows someone that was a little confused about the age of millennials. They said, millennials are so easily offended. Like I went up to one and yelled, nobody will ever love you. And he cried. Millennials are age 4 to 10, right? No, they're not. And don't ever say that to anyone. That is awful. So, no, millennials were born between 1980 and 2000. So I'm kind of at the tail end, or I guess the beginning, however you want to look at it. And the millennial generation is the largest generation in America right now. And the millennial generation is a very non-committal generation. And don't get mad at me for saying this. I'm speaking to myself. I'm part of this. I'm part of this thing. But I say that with great confidence because that's what the stats and stories show. We have higher rates of cohabitation than any generation in American history, which means we live together in romantic relationships without any real form of commitment. We change jobs like underwear. It's true. I looked up some Gallup stats, some Gallup poll stats on this. I'll just share a few of them with you. There's about 30-some different stats. Let me just give you a few. 32% of millennials say they are likely to leave their job within the next 6 months, compared to 11 to 12% of Gen Xers and Boomers. 71% of millennials are actively seeking new employment right now. 93% of millennials leave a job when asked to change roles or positions. 93%. They estimate that millennial job turnover costs the U.S. economy $30.5 billion annually. And here's the kicker. 82% of millennials say they are committed to their employers, but only 1% of HR professionals describe millennials as loyal to their employers. We lack commitment and we don't even see it. Like it's so hard to see lack of commitment in the mirror. Now, I read this Huffington Post article this week that talked all about this, and I'll just read you just a little section of it. It was a story section. It said this: I was talking to an acquaintance the other day, and our conversation turned to relationships. In her early 30s, she's finding herself increasingly concerned about the lack of that all-important piece of jewelry on her left hand. Yep, the wedding band. And it's not due to a lack of relationship, although she's been with her significant other for 11 years and they have 2 children together. He is afraid, that's in quotes, to commit to their relationship by actually making it legal and marrying her. As a result, even though they live together as a family and the kids call him dad, their children have her last name. I guess the step of legally claiming his children as his own is too scary for him as well. We truly are the generation that struggles with commitment. We follow a God that said, I will never break my commitment with you, but we're the generation that says, I will never make my commitment with you. And baby boomers and Gen Xers, you're not off the hook, okay? You're not off the hook. Millennials are not the only ones with problems. Let me just show you another tweet that talks about how there are problems in every generation. Look at this tweet. Millennials are so entitled. Hey, well, I don't see 20-somethings screaming for the manager because their coupon expired a month ago, Janet. So, hey, there's problems in every generation. I know that has nothing to do with commitment. but there are problems in every generation. Stats show that baby boomers struggle with commitment. Baby boomers still have the highest divorce rate of any generation in American history. The first generation, if you look at the trend, there's been this downward trend for years of downward trend of church commitment. If you trace it back, it really started with the baby boom generation that started moving away from church commitment. And here's where I think many Gen Xers are at, and older millennials too, for sure, with kids especially. We're not good with bold commitments because we're overcommitted. And maybe that doesn't make a lot of sense, so let me kind of explain it. See, everything we fill our lives with is a commitment. We might not sign our name to anything or take an oath or what, but when we put something on the schedule or when we sign our kids up for an activity or when we add something to our plate, that is a commitment. It's going to take some of our time. It's going to take some of our resources. It's going to deplete some of our energy. That is the definition and description of a commitment. And we commit to little meaningless things all the time without even thinking about it. We just fill our lives with all these things that, if you think about it, have no eternal significance. So when something of eternal significance comes along, when something that has divine purpose comes along, we're too busy or our finances are too strapped to commit to it. We're in these ruts of using our time and money for certain things, parts of our life that if we think about it don't really matter in the end. That when something of eternal significance comes along, we can't fit it in. And here's another big reason we struggle with commitment, especially big, bold, eternally significant commitments. We're not good with bold commitments because they come with a greater cost. Like, we're okay with committing to all these little things that aren't that significant because there's not much cost associated. We don't think there's much cost associated until they all add together. But when it's a bold commitment, it's going to cost us a lot. I think I'll pass on that. And as I reflected on my own non-committal issues this week, because this is not a you problem, this is a we problem. We're in this together. As I reflected on something, you know what came to my mind as like a non-committal issue in me? Because here's the thing. I've avoided some of the pitfalls of non-commitment with my generation. My wife and I got married at age 20. I would not recommend that one either. That was crazy. We were trying to figure out everything in the beginning. We were so immature, and that was a tough one too. And we're going to celebrate 15 years of marriage in 11 days. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that you need to help me remember how many years it's been now, because I'm starting to lose a little track of that. But yeah, I mean, I've stayed with jobs for long amounts of time, probably longer than average or whatever. We've been doing this revolution thing over 7 years. But here's the non-committal example that came to my mind. When I was faced with the idea of making a commitment to plant a church, I struggled big time. I would say I waffled 3 to 5 years from when the dream actually started in me to when my wife and I, committed to planting a church. It was years. It was years. And even when we left our previous ministry position, it took us months before we said, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to plant a church. And then it took us several more months before we finally said, okay, it's going to be in Logansport. It's going to be Revolution, that kind of thing. And I know, looking back, I know I struggled, and it took so long to make that commitment because the commitment was going to cost so much. It was going to cost us something. And when a commitment comes with a great cost, we often stall. We'd rather fill our lives with a lot of small, insignificant commitments than commit to something that has a greater cost. And God says something about this in Psalm 15. Bold commitment has such value to God. Such value to God. So much so that he inspired King David, the guy that Benaiah was the bodyguard for, he inspired King David to say this in Psalm chapter 15. Posed a couple questions. He says, "Who may worship in your sanctuary, Lord? Who may enter your presence on your holy hill?" And down in verse 4, it answers that. It says a lot of things, but then it says, "Those who keep their promises even when it hurts." Like, who's going to spend eternity? Like, who do you want in your sanctuary by your side forever, God? And God's like, those that make bold commitments and keep those bold commitments even when it hurts. Those who give their word, don't back down from their word, even when it hurts. Bold commitment. And let me tell you, Benaiah's commitment cost him a lot. Benaiah committed his life to a cause that was bigger than himself. He committed his life to serving King David and his country. he became the captain of David's bodyguard. And I guess the best illustration to kind of help us understand that today would be like the head of the Secret Service. That's who Benaiah was. And wouldn't it be awesome to walk around Logansport looking like that for just a few hours? Like you got the sunglasses and the suit and the earpiece. You just go into Walmart, go down aisle 14. Yeah, here they are. They got flower pajama pants and a Kenny Chesney shirt. They're in aisle. Yeah, because that's what you wear at Walmart, right? That's what you wear. Well, that's great because if you wake up at 11 o'clock, you need to go to Walmart. You just wear what you got. You just go. That's how. Anyway, but it'd be awesome to walk around Logansport looking like this for a few hours. But I found some interesting things about the United States Secret Service this week. The Secret Service responds to 1,500 presidential death threats per year on average. I thought that was a little high. Pretty crazy. A handful of Secret Service men have taken a bullet for the president. And thank God no Secret Service men or women have yet died in the line of duty, but multiple have taken a bullet for our president. And all Secret Service agents make a bold commitment. They actually swear an oath. And I'm just going to throw the oath on the screen and read it for you. This is the oath that a Secret Service agent swears. I, your name, do solemnly swear I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I'm about to enter. So help me God. And this is the type of bold commitment Benaiah made. I do solemnly swear to support and defend David and his kingdom no matter what the cost. And if you think that was a cake office job, you're mistaken. If the whole book of 1 Samuel in our Bible really is King Saul, the first king of the nation of Israel, trying to hunt down David, the soon-to-be king, and kill him. And Benaiah stands by David's side through all of it, keeps him alive. David gets the throne, and even after Saul dies and David takes on the throne, Benaiah still has his work cut out for him. David's son Absalom tries to steal the kingdom, and for a while David's on the run again. Benaiah stays committed to David all through that, keeps him on the throne. Benaiah gives up 40 years of his life as David's bodyguard. That's how committed he was to this kingdom and cause. And then from that commitment, he takes on bigger commitments. It says in 1 Chronicles 27, verse 5, Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, the priest, was commander of the 3rd division of 24,000 troops, which was on duty during the 3rd month. This was the Benaiah who commanded David's elite military group known as the 30. His son, Amizabadad, that guy, was his chief officer. I couldn't even get that. I tried practicing that this week. I didn't even want to pose like I knew that one. But so, I mean, think of bold commitment. He was the leader of 24,000 troops. He was over this military group known as the 30, these elite military guys. And here's how committed Benaiah was to David at the end. So David, at the end of his reign, he's sick, he's weak, he can't stand up for himself. So this guy named Adonijah takes over the throne of Israel. Adonijah takes over the throne. David wants his son Solomon to be king. So Benaiah risked his life to get Solomon to this place where he can be anointed the next king. He risked everything. He risked his life. Solomon is anointed king, and then Benaiah ushers Solomon through the streets of Jerusalem, hailing him as the new king of Israel. All the while, Adonijah, the current king, is on the throne having a banquet in his honor. And Benaiah is so committed to David and the kingdom of Israel, he kills Adonijah to keep him out of the picture for good and to give Solomon the throne. Benaiah was a man of bold commitment to a kingdom and a cause bigger than himself. And Revolution, it is time for us to be a church of bold commitment to a kingdom and a cause bigger than ourselves. And I'm almost done with the difficult parts of today's message, but I have one more that's kind of difficult to unpack. It's something I reflected on this week as I was putting this message together. I was thinking, since we started Revolution Church, I think in many ways we've been a church of bold action, but not necessarily bold commitment. And what I mean by that is we've had people come and give their lives to Christ, act boldly, but never get to that stage of committing their life to invest in the next person that needs Christ, to serve and give boldly so that more people can take the step you took. And let me explain what this non-commitment has looked like in the past for Revolution in the area of our generosity. And what we did in February this year, we actually went through a process called a generosity audit on our church. We wanted to kind of see where we were at. We were thinking God was going to open a door at some point for a new space and all that. And I don't even know if the old Staples building was in the picture quite yet or not. But we decided to do this thing called a generosity audit. We had an outside consultant come in and do some focus groups with our church. Some of you were probably part of that. And then looked at like the books of our church as units, not as family or not as names, but as units. And just kind of lined up our attendance trends with our generosity trends. And we found out lots of things. We found out some really encouraging things about Revolution Church through that process. And then we found out some things we needed some work on. One of the major findings, I'm going to bring this over so you can see it really well. One of the major findings in this process was, and I'm just going to draw kind of a graph. I'm not going to share hard numbers because we won't remember the hard numbers anyway. One of the major findings that we discovered through this process was that there was a pretty large demographic, pretty large segment of revolutionaries that were coming that had never given anything financially to Revolution Church. A portion of people about this size, if this is all a Revolution Church, a portion about this size, that had not yet taken that step of generosity, as far as we know, because I'm sure there's people here that have given cash and that's how you give and all that. But as far as yet, we didn't have any record yet, keyword yet, of individuals here taking that step of generosity. Pretty large group. There's a group about similar size to that group that we found had given between $0 and $1,000 annually on average to Revolution. Had taken a bold step in the generosity practice and had got into this area. We found a group that was much smaller than both of these groups that was giving between $1,000 and a tithe. And a tithe, that's just some language, it means a tenth. And median income in Cass County is $39,000, so they were basing it on that group about this size. And a group almost the exact same size that at Revolution are giving a tithe or above based on that median income. And probably some people that are up here maybe making more than that, so it might still be a tithe. But so that's what we discovered. I want you to just think about this. What we discovered is that many people whose lives have been impacted for good at Revolution, that have become Christ followers at Revolution, haven't moved to that step of making a bold commitment to others in the area of generosity to help them take that step. And the bold commitment dream I have with this process is that we would be so radically committed to this vision we have as a church that we would totally flip this graph. We would totally flip where we're at with this as all of us are taking next steps. And maybe even we would eliminate this box altogether because we talk about 100% engagement. That every single person that says, I'm a revolutionary, is taking next steps in their generosity journey. And here's the amazing thing. You ready for some good news? Ready for some good news? Here's the great news. Last Sunday night, we had Advanced Commitment Night. Lots of couples and individuals met at our new facility. First ever worship experience we ever had at our new building. And people committed themselves to this initiative we're going through. Some people made a commitment that's going to have some temporary moments of pain attached to it. The Psalm chapter 15 commitment. But are you ready for the biggest celebration ever? This is huge. Nearly half of the commitments from last Sunday evening were from this box right here. As far as we could tell, individuals or families that had never yet taken the step of generosity, almost half of those that committed last Sunday night were right here. And friends, I'm telling you right now, as we shift as a church, God, as we're more faithful to God, He is more faithful to us as a community of people. And this right here, this shift is going to change everything for Revolution Church. Because again, our primary goal with this is 100% engagement. Our secondary goal is 2 million. That's our primary goal is this right here. That God is changing hearts and then changing us in the area of our finances. And several people have been asking about the commitment numbers from last Sunday. Where are we at with commitments? I'm glad everyone's really excited to hear those numbers. But we want everyone, here's where we're at with that. We want everyone to make a bold commitment based on what God is speaking to you, not influenced by where we're at with current numbers as far as commitments. So what this is going to look like, on November 5th, we're doing something called Ignite Sunday. November 5th. This is the first time we've talked about November 5th. We're not going to share the number of, as far as commitments, where we're at until November 5th, because we don't want anyone influenced to give or make a commitment based on commitments we have or don't have. We want God to speak to you, and it's a decision you got to make as an individual or as a family. So on November 5th, we're going to celebrate that number, and this will be a good time to talk about that date, because again, we haven't talked about it. So on November 5th, we're calling it Ignite Sunday. We're not going to burn any money that day, okay? Trust me, it's Ignite Sunday. It's about kickstarting this thing. It's about kickstarting it. So on November 5th, we're going to celebrate where we're at with commitments as a church. It's going to be awesome. November 5th, if you've given your life to Christ at Revolution over the past several months, November 5th is your next opportunity for baptism, to get signed up for baptism. We'll be given some ways to do that. And then also November 5th is your first opportunity to give to and through Imagine 3. We're asking everyone to give as much as they can toward their commitment in one Sunday to get Imagine 320 off the ground. So if you came in today, maybe you committed last Sunday night, and you came in today like already you're ready to give to Imagine 320 today, or maybe you already gave, that's okay. But after today, we would encourage you to save up what you were planning on giving in October, and then to bring it on November 5th to be given that in one giant offering together on that Sunday. It's going to be the biggest one-day offering in the history of our church. It's going to be this amazing celebration. But before we get to November 5th, which is so exciting, can't wait to get to November 5th. It's going to be great. We have one more big Sunday in this process. Next Sunday is Commitment Sunday. It's the day our whole church steps up and says, I'm all in with this initiative so much that I'm willing to make a bold commitment, a financial commitment for 2 years to Imagine 320. So this is the week. This is the week to pray boldly. Every day, 3:20 p.m., pray boldly. God, how am I or how is our family supposed to be part of this? And I know God's going to speak. I know God's going to speak. And again, what I love about our faith, what I love about being a follower of Jesus and boldly committing to take next steps as a Jesus follower is that the one we follow committed first. I'm going to say it again. The one we follow committed first. God said, I will never break my covenant with you. And that covenant was made on a cross. Jesus committed everything to us on a cross. And this is what it says in Luke 23:46. Jesus called out with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And when he said this, he breathed his last. That's what you call bold commitment. And what's so awesome about following our Savior is it doesn't matter what level of commitment Jesus calls us to, no matter what level of commitment he calls us to in this process we're going through, it pales in comparison to the commitment Jesus made for us of everything, his spirit, his last breath. He gave it all for us. He gave it all for us. He committed it for us. I'm going to share something that I think is so drastically important for Revolution Church. Something pretty big happened in our community a week ago, and when something happens in the culture, I try not to respond immediately to it, because usually when I respond immediately, I respond wrong. Because just being led by emotion is never a good thing. But something happened, and it, I don't know, the response to what happened is what has fired me up. And I've just been praying, God, is it something I need to respond to? And if the passion or I guess what's going on in my heart kind of goes away as I'm praying and talking to God about it, then I don't think I need to publicly respond to it. But if the passion elevates, I think it's something our church needs to hear. And that's exactly what's happened with this. So many of you, if not all of you, know that last Friday evening, a big event happened at the Logansport school at the homecoming. A transgender female that identifies as male was awarded homecoming king. Now, please hear this. I am not speaking to that competition. I am not speaking to this individual should or should not have been in this competition. I'm not speaking to that at all. That's a school. It's a public school. It is not my job to judge what happened at that school. But it is our job to respond as a church. It is our job to respond as a church. And here's the thing. I don't believe there's any church in our county, any Christian church in our county, that has a disagreement in the morality of transgender. And we could throw all kinds of different moral things. I don't know if there's any church that disagrees much morally on much of anything, from lying to transgender to adultery or whatever it may be, gossip, backbiting, whatever the thing is. But where Revolution sets ourselves apart, where Revolution as a church sets ourselves apart, is in how we respond. And Revolution will always, as long as I am at the helm of this, and God has entrusted me with the leadership here, Revolution will always respond in love. This is how we will always respond. Not in hate, but in love. Because what happened, responding as a church, what happened last Friday evening was an individual that is unconditionally loved by God, one homecoming king. And friends, Jesus gave his life. He gave his life so that we would be a body of believers, a church that responds in a perfect blend, and we get this wrong all the time, but a perfect blend of grace and truth. And I think the perfect blend of that is called love. We're going to mess it up all the time. But this Revolution is a church that is open to all. That it is come as you are, and we will not forcefully change people, but we will lovingly challenge people to grow to be more like Jesus. That is who our church is, and we will always be. And Jesus gave his life for that. He gave his blood for that. And we're going to remember that sacrifice through a moment we call communion this morning. It might be this afternoon at this point. There's two elements that are in front of you. We have two stations. The bread that represents the body of Jesus, the juice that represents the blood of Jesus. We're going to take these elements and just remember, and this is open to all Christ followers here today.